Hey there, I'm a DIY track guy. This is my humble garage, and today is fender rolling day. Let's go. Please like and drop a sub for more fact-based, hard-hitting content like this. Oh, and today I use a tool I've never used before. To see me do another job I'm dangerously underqualified for, watch this. Today we go from this XXR 15x8 rim wearing a 9-year-old Falken 195 all-season tire to this newly refinished TR Motorsport C3M 15x9 rim wearing a nice fresh set of Hankook RS4s in a 225/45/15. We're going to mount these on the Miata, but before we do that we need to make some space in the fenders. I've watched the Greg Peters fender rolling video twice, so I'm pretty much an expert at this. The first thing to do is to remove this coilover, and to do that I need to remove this 17mm bolt. We're over here at the left rear corner in the trunk because we need to remove the two 14mm nuts that hold the coilover in. Now that we have the coilover out of the way, this allows us to easily move the suspension through its full range of articulation. Now that I'm looking at it, it looks like this fender already has a mild roll on it. Perhaps the previous owner did this when he fitted the 195 tires. The previous fender roll has given us a mile of clearance for this 225 tire on a 15x9 plus 36mm offset rim. And for curiosity, I have this RS4 in a 245 on a 15x10 rim. Let's see if it clears. So that's a no. For this 245 tire, it's touching the fender here. So let's do a little roll to see if we can make this clear. This is a fender roller that I borrowed from my friend Matt. He's got all the best tools and he's super nice about me stealing his stuff when he's not looking. Before we start cranking on this though, I want to heat this area up with a heat gun to try to save the paint. Pretty sure we're gonna crack it. From what I understand, it's important that we don't point this thing in one spot for too long or we could burn the paint. So through the magic of YouTube, I've been working on this fender for a little bit, and now it clears this 245 tire without any rubbing. Here we are with the 225 again, and you can see that there's more than a finger's gap here. So we're here at the left front fender, and I'm looking at the state of the lip here, and it looks like it hasn't been rolled before. Ideally, we should take the coilover out so that we can move the suspension through its full range of travel, just like we did at the rear. The easiest way to remove the front coilovers is to use the long bolt method, which involves removing this upper control arm long bolt. Unfortunately, I have the R-Theory sway bar reinforcement block in the way, so I'd have to remove the sway bar altogether, which I'd prefer not to do. So plan B is to disconnect the sway bar end link and lower these coilover collars down as far as they'll go. Before I do that, I want to make some marks and take measurements so I can get these collars back in the exact same spot as they are now. Using a paint pen, I put a match mark on the collars themselves and above and below them on the threads. Measuring from this spot here, from the bottom of this collar to the last thread is 42mm. Also, I'm going to try to count the turns as I wind them down. Unlike last time when I adjusted the height of the coilovers and I ruined these collars, this time I have the right tools. 1, 2, 23, let's leave it there, 24. This is pretty loose now. Hopefully this gives us enough range of motion in our suspension. With this 225, this is as much tuck as I can get with the coilovers bottomed out and a jack underneath the lower control arm. I removed the lower shock bolt from the control arm, and this allows the tire to tuck up another 2 centimeters or so. Doing the steering test, we see with this 225 that there's contact from here to here, and this fender liner where the tab is making some serious contact. With the 245, we can't even get the tire to tuck into the fender because it's making hard contact against the fender lip and the fender liner itself. So if I ever want to run this fitment, I'm going to have to do a little bit of a pull. The next order of business is to get rid of this fender liner so that we can have access to cutting off this tab. There's one in the back and there's one in the front over there. Now we use my favorite rotary tool to cut off this tab. Let's do the same thing to the front tab over here. Okay, let's try the steering angle. Great success! On this 245, we've made enough clearance on the fender when driving straight through the range to full left steering lock, and at full right-hand lock, we're just rubbing a bit on the coilover. I need to bolt that thing back up because I loosened up the lower bolt. One further thing of note here is that this tab, which I didn't cut off, is pretty close when you're turning left, but I was able to bend it back a little bit so that there's a good amount of clearance. So I say that's pretty good. Let's take a look at it with the 225. And here we are with the 225. There's tons of clearance here, driving straight. At full left-hand lock, there's lots of clearance. And at full right-hand lock, there's lots of clearance as expected. So we're good on this side, just need to trim the fender liner and reinstall it. Since we have the fender liner out, let's play what's inside the fender skin. I think I found some dinosaur bones in here. Next step is to trim this fender liner. I marked with a white chalk where I want to cut out, and I'm going to use these tin snips to do it. What remains of this fender liner has now been installed. Let's go ahead and put the 15x9 rim on. And here we have it, a rolled fender, cracked paint, and a 225 tire ready to go. Let me show you my work up close. This is the shape of the left front corner after the roll. There's some cracked paint along the edge that's still flaking off. And here's the shape of the right front fender. As you can see, the paint is actively chipping off here. This is by far the worst fender that I rolled out of the four, and if I'm honest, it looks pretty bad. Unless I do this. So what did we learn? Today I learned that if you're fender rolling on 30-plus-year-old paint, it's pretty much guaranteed to flake off. Even with heating it up until it was smoking hot, as soon as the roller touched it, that paint went bye-bye. I knew it was a risk, but as it was happening, I still shed a tear. I also learned that although rolling the fenders is a relatively straightforward task, the worst part is the complete re and re of the coilovers. The rears are easy, especially if you disconnect the upper control arm outer bolts, but the fronts were a problem for me. If I ever do this job again, I won't lower the coilover collars as I did. Rather, I just spend the extra time to remove the sway bar altogether so I could use the long bolt method. Otherwise, the tips that I learned from other videos that are better than mine are spot on. Angling the roller properly, going slowly, and checking the fitment at lock-to-lock steering angles, it all made the final result more than acceptable for my purposes. And a final thought, a friend of mine recently had his fenders rolled by a pro for about $350 on his 2001 Silver NB, and the paint still cracked a little bit. So even with a pro, just be aware there's still a good chance of jacking up the paint. Alright, track DIYers, that's all from the Mostly Useless Garage. You're awesome, I'm useless. Thanks for watching.